Yesterday we talked about how to graph a quadratic in standard form, right? There's actually three typical formats for graphing quadratics. You saw them all last year. We're going to go back through them. So there's standard form, vertex form, and then intercept form. So yesterday we talked about standard form, right? So what is the standard form of a quadratic? Y equals what? So those of you that took notes yesterday, bust them out. Ax squared plus, yes, in part. So we're going to start there, and then we're going to expand on it. So y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. What's the biggest power on x? 2. So this is a quadratic. In what shape do quadratics make? A parabola. Okay, key values. How do I find the vertex in standard form? How do I find the x-coordinate of a vertex? Negative b over 2a. Once I get my x-coordinate, what do I do with it? Plug it back into the equation. Everybody all right with that, yes or no? There's three formats to quadratics. So you know how lines, how we had standard form, and then we had slope-intercept form, and then we had point-slope form? With a quadratic, we have standard form, and we have vertex form, and we have intercept form. So they're variations on the same theme. So they're going to look very similar, but the first couple steps are different. So what you're going to do is when they ask you to graph the quadratic, you have to identify, is it in vertex form, intercept form, or standard form, and then use the appropriate pieces, so that way you can actually find your vertex and make the graph. So everybody all right with how to find the vertex in standard form, yeah? All right, min-max. When do we have a minimum? When the graph points which way? Up, which means that A is what? Positive. So when do we have a maximum? When the graph points down, which means A is negative. So minimums are when A is bigger than 0. Maximums are when A is less than 0. Axis of symmetry. What kind of a line is going to be the axis of symmetry? Dashed, and is it vertical, horizontal, or skew? It's a vertical line, so it's x equals negative b over 2a, right? Now, the negative b over 2a, where does that come from? The x-coordinate of the vertex, right? Everybody all right with that, yes or no? So the axis of symmetry has to pass through the vertex, so the x-coordinate of the vertex is going to be how we find the equation of the axis of symmetry. What I want to stress is when you write out the axis of symmetry on a quiz or a test, you have to write it as an equation. If you put 5, you're wrong, because I don't know what 5 is. If you put x equals 5, oh, I know that's a vertical line that passes through 5. Everybody all right? So you have to write it out as x equals here. So please be careful. But everybody good with standard form from 4.1? Okay, so moving on, vertex form. So vertex form is obviously going to give us the vertex. Does anybody remember from last year what vertex form actually looks like? Okay, so it's going to be y equals a times the quantity of x minus h squared plus k. H is going to represent our horizontal shift, and k is going to represent our vertical shift. That's very, very common that we use that, because you would have seen it before when I wrote out absolute value functions, right? It's the same h and k. H represents a sliding to the left or to the right. K represents a slide up or down. All right, so the shape, what's the biggest power you see? 2. If the biggest power is 2, is it linear or quadratic? Quadratic. So if it's a quadratic, what do we call the graph of a quadratic? A parabola. Everybody okay? All right, key values. How do I find the vertex? Well, if this is in vertex form, that means that it's going to have the vertex equation in its structure. So if you notice, H, again, that's horizontal shift, right? Left to right, which means that's an X shift. K is going to be our vertical shift, which is up and down, which is a Y. Everybody all right with that? Okay, so the last check, or the important thing, is that H comes from inside the parentheses, and is H positive or negative in this equation? Negative. What about here? Positive. So what does that mean? H is going to what? So H is going to always flip its sign. What about K? Is K positive or negative in the equation? And the point is it's positive, so it always keeps its sign. Everybody okay with that? Yes or no? H always flips its sign. So if it's a negative in the equation, it'll become a positive in the vertex. If it's a positive in the equation, it'll become a negative in the vertex. And K always stays the same. Yeah, they'll always match. So the main thing is like standard form, right? Do you see any parentheses in standard form? No. Okay, in vertex form, you have one set of parentheses with a power of 2. If you have that format, that'll be vertex form. Okay, Min-max, when do we have a minimum? When A is what? Greater than 0. That has not changed. When do we have a maximum? When A is less than 0. Axis of symmetry. Is it going to be a vertical line, a horizontal line, or skew line? It's still going to be vertical, so I got to find it here. There it is. So it's still an x equals, right? But over here, why was it negative b over 2a? What was this negative b over 2a referencing back to? X coordinate of the vertex, right? So over here, what's the x coordinate of the vertex? H. So what's my axis of symmetry equation? X equals H. All right, so very similar stuff, right? A lot of it corresponds. Finding the vertex is the most important step you have. If you find the right vertex, then you can make your chart, and then your chart's right, and then your graph is right. If you find the wrong vertex, your chart's going to be off, which means that your picture's going to be off. So it all hinges on being able to find the appropriate vertex. So the main thing that you need to focus on is for the 3 different styles of quadratic, how do I find the vertices? All right, so if I said graph this quadratic, the first thing you need to do is identify what format do we have. So is this standard form, vertex form, or intercept form? Vertex form. How do I know? One set of parentheses squared. When you see one set of parentheses to a power of 2, vertex form. So in standard form, we found A, B, and C because those were the key values, right? If you go back to your notes for vertex form, what are the key values when I wrote out the equation? A, H, and K. So that's where I'm going to start. Just like I started with A, B, C in standard form, A, H, K in vertex form. So what is my A? -4. What is my H? -2. Very good, because it's in parentheses, so it's got to flip. And what's my K? 5. Whenever you graph a quadratic, the first thing you need to find is going to be your vertex, and then you want to find your axis of symmetry, and once you have your vertex, you can make your chart off of it. So my vertex is going to be what coordinates? H and K. So what's my H? And what's my K? So there is your vertex, done and done. So where's my axis of symmetry? X equals what? -2. So now, make my XY chart. What goes in the middle always? The vertex. I need 2 numbers bigger, so give me 2 numbers bigger than -2. -1 and 0, give me 2 numbers smaller than -2. -3 and -4. Everybody all right so far? Okay, now, when you actually evaluate this, I have powers and parentheses and all that stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my order of operations. So when it comes to evaluating this, right, order of operations, what do I use first? Parentheses, and then what? Exponents, and then the multiplication, and then the addition, right? So I plug in my -1 for x. I have to do what's inside the parentheses first. So what is -1 plus 2? +1, right? So that's the P done. And then I can do the E, the exponents, right? So what's 1 squared? 1. And then I multiply, so what's -4 times 1? -4 plus 5, +1. Everybody okay with the order of this? If you're using a calculator, you want to type it in exactly the way it looks, including parentheses. If you do not include parentheses, you are wrong. So plug in a 0. What's 0 plus 2? 2. 2 squared? 4. 4 times -4. -16. -16 plus 5? -11. So make sure that when you plug in here, you just work inside out, right? Parentheses, power, multiplication, addition. Up next is -3, right? 1. All right, and then for -4 is -11. All right. So now it's just like everything else we've done. I start off with my axis of symmetry, which is going to be what kind of a line? Solid or dashed? Dashed line. Vertical at x equals -2, right? All right, I'm going to change my y scale to count by 2s. And then I still want to mark my x scale so that way the reader knows that I didn't change both scales. Everybody good? All right, where was my vertex? -2, 5. All right, at -3, I was at 1. At -1, I was at 1. At 0, I was at -11, right? And at -4, I was also at -11. All right, so again, is this pointing up or down? down because A is negative, right? Can everybody see that it has the U shape to it? All right, so before you graph your line, you want to check and make sure that it has the U shape, right? If you plot your points and you're getting a straight line, then your table is wrong or your vertex is wrong, something along those lines, okay? So that doesn't mean keep going. That means stop, go back, and figure out what's broken and fix it. So you start at your vertex, curl down through your points as best as you're able to here. And the only thing that's left to do is to label. So label your axis of symmetry and label your vertex. And as you can tell from the graph, right, if I looked at the intercepts, they would be here and here. And the vertex is exactly where? In the middle of them. Everybody okay with that? So for intercept form, we're going to be using that connection.